Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Welcome back to Philippine Politics and Governance. Today, we will talk about the roles and powers of the executive branch of the Philippine government. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. If you have questions, please leave them on the comments section. Thank you. Just a little review from our previous topics. The Philippines is a democratic, presidential country. The Philippine government has three branches: the executive branch, the legislative branch and the judiciary branch. Recall the principle of separation of powers. This is incorporated onto our constitutions as a means to separate the powers among the three branches of the government. The judicial branch has the power to make judgments on law and ensure that orders and proclamations are constitutional before they are passed. Legislative has the power of the purse, and the power to make and change laws. The executive has the power to put these laws into action and make sure that they are implemented properly. Checks and balances. The president has the power to approve the laws and orders legislated by Congress. If the president does not approve of a certain piece of legislation, he or she may veto it and call for a review by Congress. As for the judiciary, the president also appoints the members of the Supreme Court, with the approval of Congress. The president also has the power to grant pardons and amnesties, with consent by Congress. Although the president has the power to approve or veto legislations by the Congress, the latter may still invalidate the veto by a vote of 2/3 of both houses of Congress. The legislative branch also initiates the impeachment process, as well as the canvassing of votes for the president and vice president positions during the national elections. Aside from this, the president must seek the consent of the legislative branch on certain matters, such as the approval of international agreements and treaties, the granting of pardons and amnesties, and the appointment of members of both the cabinet and the judicial and bar council. Congress also determines the jurisdictions of courts in the country, as well as the qualifications of members of the lower courts. The judicial branch has the authority to interpret or assess laws passed by the Congress and approved by the President. As such, the Supreme Court may deem a certain law as unconstitutional. The judiciary also decides on the legality of the actions of the President, as well as his or her executive proclamations and orders. In addition, the justices of the Supreme Court are members of the electoral tribunals which look into protests on the presidential, vice presidential, and Congress elections. The court also renders decisions on the constitutionality of any decision or action of an official in the executive branch. Executive powers. Executive power is roughly defined as the power to implement laws in one country. The executive branch has been vested with the power to execute laws and make sure that they are properly implemented. The structure, organization, powers, responsibilities, and prohibitions of the executive branch are provided under Article 7 of the 1987 Constitution. Section 1 states that the executive power is vested in the President of the Philippines, the President and the Vice President. The table shows the qualifications, manner of election and term of office of the President and the Vice President. Both the President and the Vice President should be a natural-born citizen, a registered voter, able to read and write, at least 40 years of age on the day of election, and a resident of the Philippines for at least 10 years immediately preceding his or her election. Section 2, Article 7 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution. Manner of election. As stated in Section 4, Article 7, the President and Vice President shall be elected by a direct vote of the people. The person having the highest number of votes, plurality method, shall be elected. For the President, the term of office is 6 years and the President shall not be eligible for re-election. The Vice President, on the other hand, has 6 years in one term, and the shall not serve for more than 2 successive terms. If there are inquiries or discrepancies pertaining to election, the Supreme Court shall be the one to settle questions about the election, returns, and qualifications of these officials. As stated in Article 7, Section 4, the Supreme Court, sitting en banc, is the sole judge of all contests relating to the election, returns, and qualifications of the President or Vice President. The Supreme Court serves as the Presidential Electoral Tribunal. The presidential election is held on the second Monday of May, unless otherwise provided by law. In case of a tie, the candidate who will win will be chosen by the vote of a majority of Congress, both Senate and House of Representatives, voting separately. A president may be removed from office through impeachment on the grounds of culpable violation of the Constitution, treason, bribery, graft and corruption, other high crimes, or betrayal of public trust. Section 2, Article 9, 1987 Philippine Constitution. Powers of the President. The President has control over all executive departments, bureaus, and offices. He or she has the power of general supervision over local governments and autonomous regions. The President also holds the power to nominate, appoint, and remove officials. Power of appointment is stated in Section 16 or Article 7. The President has also budgetary and fiscal power. He or she also has military power, or power of the sword, such that he or she also acts as the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. The power to contract or guarantee foreign loans on behalf of the country is also under the powers of the President. Pardoning power as well as powers to check other branches of the government are also constitutionally vested onto the President. 4 groups of officers whom the President shall appoint. In the previous modules, we talked about the constitutional commissions and how their commissioners are appointed by the President. Also, we have mentioned before that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is also appointed by the President after reviewing the pool of nominees. These are also appointed by the President. The heads of the executive departments, ambassador, other public ministers and consuls, officers of the armed forces from the rank of colonel or naval captain, and other officers whose appointments are vested in him in this Constitution, all other officers of the government whose appointments are not otherwise provided for by law, those whom the President may be authorized by law to appoint, officers lower in rank whose appointments the Congress may by law vest in the President alone. Scope and limits of the presidential authority. The President is also the head of the state. That is, he or she represents the entire state during international functions. The President is also authorized to issue executive orders. These orders are considered to be quasi-laws because they have the effect of laws, are promulgated as such, and may be challenged in courts. He or she can also issue proclamations and administrative orders. These pronouncements relate to the administration of the various offices and agencies within the executive branch, and include tasks such as the reorganization of executive offices, providing for rules and regulations that will be followed by government offices, declaration of national holidays and emergencies, and the creation of ad hoc committees in the executive branch. The President is also tasked with approval and awarding of national arts and national scientists. Checks on the President's power. The Congress specifies the conditions and restrictions of certain powers it assigns to the President. Only through the authorization and specifications of Congress could the President exercise power of taxation. The Congress can request the department heads under the executive department to appear and be heard on any matters pertaining to their corresponding departments. The Congress can override the President's veto by 2/3 vote in each House. The Supreme Court may declare executive orders and proclamations unconstitutional. The Supreme Court may review the declaration of martial law and suspension of the writ of habeas corpus. Some privileges vested upon the President. Constitutional privileges. As stated in Section 6, Article 7, the President shall have an official residence. The salaries of the President and Vice President shall be determined by law and shall not be decreased during their tenure. No increase in said compensation shall take effect until after the expiration of the term of the incumbent during which such increase was approved. They shall not receive during their tenure any other emolument from the government or any other source. Jurisprudential privileges. Presidential immunity from suit. This privilege has 2 aspects. through international law and domestic law. In international law, sovereign immunity is exercised. This is an exception to the complete and absolute jurisdiction of a state within its territory. Since the president is the head of state, the courts of other countries cannot sue the president. Domestically speaking, the president is immune from suit which is based on continuing practice and practicality. It is a simple notion of the president not being able to do his job properly, when he is constantly defending his person in court. Presidential privilege of communication. This is also called the executive privilege. Almonte used the term in reference to the same privilege subject of Nixon. It quoted the following portion of the Nixon decision which explains the basis for the privilege: the expectation of a president to the confidentiality of his conversations and correspondences, like the claim of confidentiality of judicial deliberations, for example, has all the values to which we accord deference for the privacy of all citizens and, added to those values, is the necessity for protection of the public interest in candid, objective, and even blunt or harsh opinions in presidential decision-making. A president and those who assist him must be free to explore alternatives in the process of shaping policies and making decisions, and to do so in a way many would be unwilling to express except privately. These are the considerations justifying a presumptive privilege for presidential communications. Rosell defines this privilege as the right of the president and high-level executive branch officers to withhold information from Congress, the courts, and ultimately the public. Thank you for watching. In the next lesson, we will be looking at the roles and powers of the legislative branch. See you there.